Hey you all, Charlie Merrill with Merrill Performance. Today I want to talk about low back pain because it's so common, it's so prevalent not only in the US but around the world that estimates are around 80% of us will suffer from some type of low back pain at some point in our lives. And a lot of those people will tip over into becoming chronic or having recurrent problems with their low back. And when I see people with low back pain in the clinic, I spend a lot of time psychoeducating about things like how MRI findings are normal, how MRI findings don't correlate with pain, that degenerative change as we age is a normal process and it doesn't correlate with pain, that low back pain in some cases has been called a social contagion because what we believe about it, what we hear about it, actually manifests and keeps these neural pathways that create low back pain turned on. And while I find that psychoeducation and helping people understand what causes low back pain can be really helpful in reducing fear, there's nothing better, there's nothing more powerful than a really good story. And I share my personal story often in the clinic, but I wanted to share that with you today. I'm in my mid-40s now, and I was a very healthy, athletic guy coming up through high school. I was fortunate enough to come to CU Boulder for college, and I was so excited to be here where I could be running and cycling and skiing and doing all these things that I wasn't able to do as readily growing up on the East Coast. Skiing is something that I'd done growing up, and I was super excited to come out to Colorado and just ski moguls like crazy, like sun up to sundown. So one day, my freshman year of college, we're up in Winter Park, and we're just ripping, we're just skiing moguls, fast, hard, and there's a moment during the day, towards the afternoon, starting to get a little tired, when I feel something happen in my back, like something explodes, something shifts, something just didn't feel right. And it was during the run, it was, during a hard impact on a bump. And, being 18 or whatever, I just skied the rest of the day. I was like, oh, it'll be fine. That night, I'm back in the dorms, and I wake up in the middle of the night, full sweats, fever. I get out of bed, and I have to drag my leg to the bathroom. And, it's terrifying in the moment. You're like, what is happening with my body? Am I getting sick? What's going on? I go to the bathroom, I make it back to bed, and, my memory is not super clear on how the next week goes, but relatively quickly, the symptoms resolve. Maybe I had one day of acute pain, and I kind of moved past it. A week, maybe 2 weeks go by, and it's like nothing ever happened. Never had any doctor visits, never had an MRI, never had an x-ray, just felt better. Go back to skiing. I'm on the triathlon team, I'm training a ton, no restrictions. I have no issues for the rest of my college career with my low back. So fast forward to my early 20s, finished college, massive life change. All of a sudden I'm working. I'm trying to decide if I want to go into a career in physical therapy. So I'm working as an assistant, getting some experience. I'm in a very serious new relationship, which is very exciting for so many reasons. I move into a new place. It's like that transition from being in school to then like being an adult and being in your life. Very exciting time, lots of change. And we know that during times of change, this is sometimes when pain can come on. So I'm on a road trip with my very serious girlfriend at the time, and I start to have this super intense right buttock pain. This is not pain that I had in college. While my leg was affected, I didn't remember this like intense pain in my glute. And over the next week, it started to progress, go down my leg, started to go all the way into my foot, create some numbness and tingling, and it just got worse in the weeks from there. It was super intense. And it's important to go back and share a couple of things. The first one is that before I left for college, my parents got a divorce. And divorce is always hard for kids at any age. But what was really interesting about the timing of my parents' divorce is that I was about to go to college, and I had the sort of opportunity to let them deal with that stuff, and I got to go and be like, hey y'all, I'm out of here. You guys figure this out. I'm going to go live my life. I'm going to college. I'm leaving the nest, and basically I'll deal with that later. So while I processed emotions around that at the time, I didn't fully sort of work through that process of understanding my parents' divorce. And I was like, I'm gone. That was the first thing. The second thing that's really relevant at this time in my life is that I'm trying to decide what my career is going to be. And there was all this sort of history with my dad and I especially about what's the right career, what's the right path, how are you going to be successful, what thing are you going to choose to do. And in any relationship with your parents, there's bound to be some conflict about the decisions you make. And this was sort of a hot topic for my dad and I. So I'm making this decision that maybe isn't the most popular for him, but feels really important for me. Again, I'm also in this new relationship that's growing and blossoming, and in my mind, maybe even unconsciously, I'm thinking, is this the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with? So needless to say, I'm weighing all this change. Symptoms come on. My first thought is, I wonder if this is tied back to when I hurt my back in college. So now I start going and doing all the things. I get the MRI, I see the doctor, I start getting opinions, and at this point, you guys, I'd lost size in my right glute. I had no reflex in my Achilles. I had weakness in my foot. I had numbness and tingling and intense nerve pain every time I went to bend forward. And so I have all the signs, all the trappings of basically a disc herniation. And when I go see the physiatrist, who was a fantastic physiatrist, the first thing she wanted to do was do surgery. I don't remember there being an option to have an injection at that time, but they wanted to go in and remove the disc material because there's this big old herniated disc pressing on my L5-S1 nerve root on the right side, correlates brilliantly with my pain, right? By the time I get through this, because I'm working as an assistant with a physical therapy clinic, they're helping me try to get clear on what I need to do. My mentor at the time, the owner of the clinic, says, hey, Charlie, you should really go get a second opinion. There's this great physician who's not a surgeon. I want you to go talk to him. So I do, and at that point, I'm already starting to see little hints of improvement, even though there are all these signs that are potentially scary signs of what people consider like permanent nerve damage, right? So I go and I see this other doctor, and he's a totally different opinion. He's like, look, man, you're young, you're healthy, you're active, you're already seeing improvement. And this is interestingly, a physician that sees a lot of chronic pain and a lot of people after car accidents, so people that are dealing with pain that has been going on a long time. So I think he had this different perspective. And what he did was reduce fear for me around what was going on, and he gave me hope. And he said, it's possible you can get better. And that was the path I chose. And, it took 6 months of things like massage, manual therapy, core stability. I had great help from the physical therapy clinic where I worked, and I think this is one of the reasons I ended up getting into the field, because I saw what was possible when you have, really smart people giving you really good advice. I was super motivated to get well. I'd go and I'd swim regularly in the pool. That felt really good. I found all these ways that I could continue moving. This was the advice I got, just to continue moving and find ways that I could do that without pain, to the point where I even set my bike up on a trainer, maybe on rollers at the time, and I just sat straight up because I couldn't bend forward to hold the handlebars. So I just sat straight up and I rode my bike, and it felt fantastic. And rather than shutting everything down and just resting, very old school advice, I was encouraged to move. And of course, we know now that things like core stability maybe don't correlate as well as we used to think when it comes to low back pain. But I had this very strong belief system, both personally, because of what I was doing for a living, and also because of the therapist that I was working with. I had this strong belief system that core stability was important for my back pain. And guess what? It helped. And for many, many years, all of the things I took away from my physical therapy experience at that point, like prone press-ups, McKenzie extensions where you're pressing up on your elbows, that gave me great relief. So I built this list of things that felt protective. I did them regularly. After 6 months, pretty much got better, okay? As I said, I'm in my mid-40s. I've had no pain from that time until now, with the exception of very few flare-ups. of very mild sensitivity over time. The back pain just completely went away. And I was always left wondering, I wonder what my back looks like. I wonder what's going on with my back. And more recently, there have been these great studies, these follow-up MRI studies, to show that 80+% of the time, herniated discs, like mine, big significant herniated discs, spontaneously resorb or dissolve or go away within a year. And we see that people have these big discs, and then a year later on a follow-up MRI scan, they're just completely gone. The body cleans it up, walls it off, symptoms go away. I had all these stories though about now I'm going to have degenerative change. Now I'm going to get older, and I'm going to, my disc is going to wear out, and what's going to happen when I'm 50 and 60. And we also know that just because you have a disc herniation doesn't mean you're going to have degenerative change that creates stenosis and all these other scary things when you get older. So my timing is really interesting because I spent a lot of time in this sort of guarded state about my back. I wouldn't even say it was guarded. I felt like I had control over my back pain. I felt like I had these strategies to control it, but I didn't fully understand the long-term implications until maybe the last 10 years as pain science has emerged and we understand these things better and better. So one thing I wanted to add to the narrative that I think is really important to share is that just because I avoided surgery in my story doesn't mean that that was the right decision. We know there are some cases, and I might have been one of those, where surgery is a fantastic option. In fact, I might have felt better if I'd taken the first doctor's advice and had surgery. And while I'm glad I didn't have to have a discectomy, we know from the long-term outcome studies that the 5-year long-term data doesn't show that not having surgery is any better from having surgery. So even if you originally had surgery for your herniated lumbar disc or any surgery for your spine, it doesn't mean that you don't have the same opportunity that I had in this case to learn some things from the experience that translate to you having a better long-term outcome, having a sort of better perspective on your back going forward. There's an opportunity to sort of reduce fear either way. So for a long time, core stability was my go-to. I'd always feel like I needed to be stretching. I was very, I would manage my volume of training and exercise carefully so that I didn't overdo things. I had certain belief systems about how I should set my bike up, running shoes, I had all these things that I felt gave me control over my back pain. And now that I understand the research better and I understand maybe the truth of what causes low back pain, I look back and I say, wow, isn't that amazing that the flare-up of what probably happened when I was skiing moguls when I was 18, that flare-up 4 or 5 years later correlated, happened at a time when I was going through massive life change, making really important life decisions around who to marry, what job, what career to follow. And those things were loaded for me in very real ways, as I shared. So, the way I reflect on it now, is it possible that flare-up, while I had a herniated disc, it might have even progressively herniated over the course of those 4 years to the point where it got to where it got when my symptoms flared up. But isn't that interesting that all these psychosocial variables, psychological variables, that I wasn't even paying attention to might have been driving that? And if I'd spent some time making that very conscious, noticing that this was a significant point in my life, would I have gotten better more quickly than I got better in, it took, as I said, it took 6 months. Would I have gotten better more quickly? And if I'd not had all these social implications to my pain, all these belief systems around core stability and exercises to do, would I have moved through my 30s with less fear that I had a low back that was damaged or fragile? Even though I didn't really have any pain, would I have moved through that phase of my life with a different perspective on my body, what it was maybe going to be, and less fear of the future even? At this point, I don't think I'll ever know that, but I wanted to share this with you because so many people I see are carrying around these stories about their body and what they believe is wrong with it or what's damaged in it. And that really holds us back, especially as athletes. That really limits us, and it doesn't need to. And does this mean that I need to go back and get psychotherapy to process my parents' divorce from when I was 18? Does it mean that I need to go get psychotherapy to talk about my relationship with my dad and his sort of hopes and dreams for me in my career and how that maybe didn't line up with where I wanted to go? Not necessarily. You know, what's so interesting about pain is once people make the conscious connection, once they see what's going on and they reduce fear and they let go of jettison some of the stories about what their body is and isn't, pain tends to go away. And of course, there's value in going back and processing those things, not just for back pain, but to live a happy, productive, healthy life with healthy relationships. I think it behooves us all to consider those things as important variables. But we don't need to always go that far to deal with pain. Now, one more thing I want to share with you, which I think is so interesting about my back, is now that I'm a father in my mid-40s, this is another phase of life when some of these core issues for me that came up when I was growing up, some of these things I shared, are coming up for me in a totally new way. And what I think is so interesting about the past few months as I'm navigating some of my parental challenges that we all have is that I have this really interesting sensitivity that comes and goes in my left glute. It feels nervy. It feels very similar to what I had on the right side, but it's very mild. And it doesn't affect my function like it did on the right side. But it's sort of the way I relate to it is it's sort of a reminder from my brain that here we are again. These things are coming back up. These emotions are coming back up. They're being brought back to your attention, Charlie, and you need to pay attention. And one of the pain behaviors that we see so common in people that are dealing with pain that's driven by the brain rather than by a structural issue, which is most of us, is that the pain will switch sides. The symptoms will actually show up on the other side. And so now that I understand what's going on, I can relate to this in a totally different way. I watch it come and go. I watch it come on at times when I'm dealing with these other stresses. It'd be super easy for me to blame this on my track workout, or because I'm working on backflips on the trampoline, or because I'm doing something hard on my body, because I'm doing those things all the time. But that would be a mistake because I would be looking at the wrong thing, right? So if I can recognize the fact that I'm going through these things as a parent, and I can attend to those, and I can be aware of them, process them, work on them with my partner, talk about them with my friends, really be mindful of them, the symptoms go away on the left side. My old school thinking would have said, well, now, Charlie, your spine's degenerative because your old disc herniation is wearing out, and now you must be getting nerve compression on the other side. And this is, again, another example of someone that had an injury in their 20s, now in their 40s, and now they end up in pain again, and very quickly it snowballs into a chronic or recurrent problem with low back pain, and it doesn't have to. All we need to do is recognize what's going on for us in our lives, recognize the symptom behavior, that it's behaving funny, it's not behaving like a structural problem because it switched sides, because it's coming and going, because it's not correlated with my activity, and I need to keep going out and playing and moving my body and doing the things I know that are healthy for me. And you know what? When I do that, I actually feel better. And this is another example of symptoms behaving not like a structural problem, but like a brain-mediated problem. So I know that's a long story, but I felt like it was really important to sort of reflect back over this massive timeline, because we know that, especially with chronic low back pain, there are a lot of psychosocial factors that play into it. And it took me a long time to sort of rebuild this story as I reflected on all the variables. It was not something I noticed as I was going through it. And I wish I'd been able to do that. And while these physical strategies, these PT strategies were actually quite effective for me, and I give them a lot of credit for helping me move past my back pain in 6 months, could it have been different? Could things have been different if I had a different narrative, if I had different psychoeducation, if I knew then what I knew now? So I wanted to share this with you all. I hope you find it helpful. Please click the like button. Please share with anybody you know that has low back pain that you think this story might be helpful for them. Stories are so poignant, and I like to sort of make this a more regular part of me sharing with you not only my own stories, but I hear so many stories day to day of clients, and they're so powerful, and I think they're so helpful when people can relate to them. Sometimes it's like a light bulb goes off, and I've seen people get better just from hearing a good story after having years of pain. I'm happy to field your questions about what's going on with your back. If you want to get in touch and tell me your story And if there's some information I can share, I'm always happy to do that. So please reach out. I'm wishing you all a pain-free day, week, month, year, the rest of your life. And I look forward to seeing you next time.